What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm going to be going over the newest season in Marvel Snap July 2024 with a guide on how to spend your resources coming from a top free-to-play player. Here's the quick guide. Copycat is the card that you should be getting this season. I'll go through the reasons for that in a moment, as well as breaking down things that you can do with all of the cards coming out this season. But if you can only pick one card, I'd go for Copycat. And the reason that I say one card is because that's generally how you want to view spending your resources as a free-to-play player. Target one card coming out each season and stockpile some resources. That way you can get a bunch of cards when you need to. Sometimes I skip seasons altogether, and this past season I was able to grab Arishem, Phastos, and Cersei because I do such a good job stockpiling my resources and not going for cards that I don't need. And speaking of don't need, let's first take a look at this season's Season Pass card, Gwenpool, which obviously I won't be getting or really talking about too much this season as a free-to-play player, but there's actually a direct comparison between Gwenpool and Nakia, because Nakia used to do pretty close to what Gwenpool does. Nakia's been changed a few times. I thought this might be interesting. We could take a look at the history of Nakia in Marvel Snap for those that haven't been playing since the game launched, but on launch, Nakia gave all cards in your hand +2 power, which initially seems like it's even better than Gwenpool. It's just different, but for the most part, I think it could be argued that this is a more powerful ability, and it was too strong at 3 cost, even on a 3/1. I will say that one thing that Gwen has going for her, oops, I'm zoomed in a little bit too far here. There we go. So Gwen, if you play Gwen as a 4/6, and then you play all 3 of the cards that Gwen pumps up, you're playing a 4/12 effectively, and that's before any other synergies even. So that is reasonably powerful to just look at it from that perspective. There are some other things that you can do, like if you only have one card in your hand with Gwenpool, then you'll hit that same card 3 times, which is probably better. So it definitely benefits you to have less cards in your hand, whereas Nakia kind of had a benefit from having more cards in your hand, and then you played like Sarah to dump all of them out on the final turn. But they're both going to have the same synergies with Brood, Sebastian Shaw, Mr. Sinister, and Deadpool. So they do have that in common. For a brief time, Nakia gave 2 cards in your hand +2 power, and this is specifically what I want to talk about, because people did not like this. People didn't like only 2 cards in your hand getting +2 power because it was just too random, and you couldn't control it. And then it became give the leftmost cards in your hand +2 power, and of course still a huge downgrade from this, but was an attempt to fix the card in the same way that we've seen like Blade become targeted and Spider-Ham become targeted to a certain position in your hand. Gwenpool isn't launching with that, so that might make her a little bit awkward. I also think that in terms of when she comes out on the curve, you think of a typical Silver Surfer deck. For the most part, the play lines are currently, you want to play Brood into Absorbing Man on turns 3 and 4. You don't want to hold on to your Brood so that you can pump it up with Gwenpool, and similar thing with Sebastian Shaw. Most of these cards you want to get into play earlier, because on the final turn of the game, that's when you want to be playing Silver Surfer, where Gwenpool is kind of like, okay, play Gwenpool on turn 4, and then maybe turn 5 play Sarah, and then turn 6 it's asking you to play the Brood, the Sebastian Shaw, and the Silver Surfer all in one turn, which is certainly possible, but it just kind of lends to less dynamic curves, I guess, as I want to say, because if you've played Silver Surfer lists, you'll know that like sometimes you just don't have anything to play on turn 3 because your cards, you want to hang on to them longer. And that happens when you have too many reactive cards, like if you're playing Killmonger and Silver Surfer, and you're playing like Gladiator or something like that, which isn't super common in Silver Surfer lists, but I just bring it up to stress some of the awkwardness, I think, with Gwenpool. In general, I don't think you really want to be playing a setup card like that on turn 4, so I don't really think it's going to be that powerful of a card, but we'll see. The big benefit of Gwenpool over the old Nokia, which again was strong, and a 412 is definitely worth considering, but how you're going to get the most value out of Gwenpool is if you can target your triggers by having less cards in your hand. That could mean playing just like cheaper cards. I'm thinking some type of combo, trying to get the triggers onto Human Torch, and then even with that, like with Human Torch and Deadpool, two of the things that can pick up the most from Gwenpool, in addition to Black Panther. So those are going to be Black Panther on the more expensive side, obviously, but Deadpool and Human Torch being cheaper options. The awkward part, though, then being that you're only going to have one turn still to make use of all of those pumps. So if you play Gwenpool on 4, turn 5, you are looking to play Human Torch plus a way to move it, be that Cloak or Iron Fist or Ghost Spider, or if you're playing Deadpool, then you need to play Deadpool and destroy it all in the same turn, and that can get a little trickier. Next up is Copycat, though, which is the main card I wanted to talk about in this video, and it's not the first card getting released this season, but I'm just going in the order that the video presents these cards, and they talk about Copycat next. When you draw this, steal the text from the bottom card of your opponent's deck, and it's a 3/5. It's Nocturne level stats. So how good is stealing the bottom card of your opponent's deck? Willow CCG did some maths and a breakdown of how frequently, just like using random cards, this is going to be a good effect. Here's the thing though, people don't play cards with bad effects in their decks. Really. People do play some cards with drawbacks that they then mitigate, thinking things like Infinite or Giganto, or even some stuff like Red Skull in a Shuri Sauron deck. For the most part, though, people are playing good cards. Like, if this even just copies, I immediately think of Nocturne, thinking because this is a 3/5. People play that because it's a good card. People play Red Guardian. Most cards have worse stats than 3/5. These are really pushed stats. And so I think Copycat is going to be really, really strong most of the time. There is a sort of tech against Copycat, in addition to some of the things I've said before, which is just playing Arishem, at which point Copycat is more or less random, but honestly less, because still even in an Arishem deck, 11 of those 24 cards in your deck are going to be cards that have really, really good effects in Arishem lists typically. So if you can hit any of those cards, any of the real cards that your opponent is playing, I think those are pretty good for you. There is, I'm just now kind of thinking there's no real way to like manipulate it, which is interesting because it's not like the text will ever change, but it would be cool if there was like, okay, say you get a really bad Copycat, then you like play Cable, steal a card from your opponent, and now your Copycat is something different. But this specifically steals the text from the bottom card of your opponent's deck. So I believe what that will do is make the bottom card of your opponent's deck a no abilities card, which is kind of interesting. And typically that's going to be pretty bad. In the case of like Red Skull, then I guess it does get a buff from losing its ability. And similarly, if you could play a Sauron, if your opponent plays a Sauron and then you draw your copycat, you're going to steal the fact that it doesn't have any abilities, and you aren't even going to have the drawback on copycat. So that is kind of an upside, which is interesting to think about. But the other huge upside of copycat is the asynchronous information that you get from it, which is, I believe, how this card is going to work. I believe you are going to see the text on copycat, and your opponent will have no clue what you just stole. They won't even know that you drew copycat. And so you know one card that they're not going to be drawing this game, assuming some shenanigans from like Magic or I guess Loki, or what was the other thing, like Magic plus Nico, like some effects that allow you to draw your entire deck. For the most part, stealing a card from the bottom of their deck is going to give you really huge information about what your opponent doesn't have. And if we watch this video here real quick, let me, just make sure the sound's coming through my headphones. I believe in this one it steals, it steals a Doctor Doom first. But at some point during this video, it steals a Galactus. And they wind up playing the Galactus. All right, here it steals that, there it steals a Galactus. Perfect. They wind up playing the Galactus in this video, which I think is like a pretty big mistake, to be honest. But what is really cool about that is now you know that your opponent isn't going to Galactus you. So we see in this example that we're playing like some, just deck with a bunch of 1-cost cards, or maybe it's like a high, it looks like it's a high Evo deck. There would be no reason to activate Galactus. You just draw your copycat and then you snap, because you realize your opponent is a deck that built around Galactus and they don't have it this game. Now that's a very specific example, but I think that it's very important to keep in mind just for a hidden part of copycat's power with that asynchronous information. I think it's the best card coming out this season. I don't think it's great into RSM specifically, but I do think it's still good and playable and fine against RSM, and it will be the one card that I'm planning on picking up this season. But I think you could also skip on Copycat entirely. I think that you could not get a single card this season, and while that sounds like people, I think, might push back against that idea a little bit. They're like, wait, I want to get the new cards. This is a video about the new cards. Tell me which one to get. If you followed my recommendation last season and got RSM, it's not like you necessarily need any cards. That was one of the selling points that I talked about when I talked about reasons to get RSM. It gives you enough new stuff that I think should hold you over, not necessarily needing to get any new cards this season. And everybody's getting a new card for free this season. And it might actually be, well, it's at the very least an anti-RSM card. So we'll get to that in just a moment, but first, Hydra Bob. After each turn, this moves if a player snapped. I think that this is really cool, adding additional mechanics in the game that care about if players snapped or not. And I just think it's really cool, even if this card isn't necessarily pushed. This seems like a perfect example to me of something that could be Series 4 or honestly even Series 2, just because it's a really interesting card. It would probably see play in the Jane Fastos list that I played just as a 0/4, but other than that, I don't think too many players are going to care if they don't have it. There is some really interesting counterplay, your opponent might snap not because they're in a good position, but just to move it, and it's just going to change how snapping works in Marvel Snap in general, because a deck playing Hydra Bob actually is in kind of a disadvantaged position going into any game, because you can't snap if Bob is in your deck. You don't want to be snapping just because you have a good hand. You need to hold your hand so that you can snap when you have Bob, assuming that you're playing other synergies with it, with Craven and stuff like that. And on the flip side, once Bob releases, which Bob is actually coming out tomorrow, there is additional incentive to snap earlier on every single game before your opponent reveals Hydra Bob. Assuming like you don't see that they're like an Arishem deck or something, snapping earlier on will, because once Bob comes down, then it becomes harder to snap against a player because you don't want to move Bob and give them additional synergies. So snapping earlier will allow you to not move Bob, which I think is just like a really interesting aspect. And honestly, I think that more players should probably be snapping earlier regardless. But I think it's cool just for snap in general. Even if I don't think it's necessarily that powerful, it is still a combo with Angela and Craven, which I think is a powerhouse that hasn't really seen, like Craven hasn't been in the Angela decks recently. Honestly, I think this will see some play. I think that if you enjoy Elsa Angela decks, I think that Hydra Bob is already pretty solid, and I'm really curious to just feel the impact of it in every game and playing around it. I think that that will be just a lot of fun, but I don't think it's like a necessary card, but I might be a little bit biased because I don't have Elsa yet, but it does seem cool at the very least. I'm going to talk about Cassandra Nova now, again, just because that's the order that things came out in this video. And Cassandra Nova kind of teased talking about it a minute ago. This is a really interesting card, and everybody's getting it, which is part of the reason that I think you could justify just skipping this month entirely in terms of spending your Spotlight keys. You can earn Cassandra Nova from the Deadpool's Diner event, which means that you don't have to spend any keys and you can save your keys for future months. And it also just makes this month much more free-to-play friendly in general because there's going to be a week where a new card isn't releasing. That's not what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to send out Cassandra and then still have another new card release that week. But no, they're making it really easy for everyone to stay on top of stuff. So steal 1 power from each card in your opponent's deck. For the most part, when you play this, your opponent should have 6 cards left in their deck, so it's a 3-7. And it could be argued it's like a 3-9 or 3-10, depending on how many of those draws would otherwise be relevant to your opponent. But even if none of the cards that they draw they wind up playing, which, again, doubtful, still a 3-7 if you play it on turn 3. The later on you play it, the weaker it's going to be. If you play it on the final turn, it's only like a 3-4. And you could also play it a little bit later, but like alongside Wong, or you could Absorbing Man it. That's kind of interesting to have other on-reveal cards in a 3-cost deck, because obviously you can pump up Cassandra with Silver Surfer. So all of that is pretty interesting, but I think that one thing that could also be pretty powerful with Cassandra is it's kind of like a mini Darkhawk. It's a Darkhawk that isn't going to get rogued, but specifically it's good against Arishem. And if people are looking for, like, they released Arishem into the wild, and now they're giving everybody Cassandra for free because there's just too much Arishem out there, right? Which obviously I don't think was their intention, but against an Arishem deck, this is just a 3-15 on the final turn. If you play it a little bit earlier, it's as big as a 3-18, or if you play it in Arishem, you can play it on turn 2, then it's a 3-19, which is crazy for, So this card's very good. It does mean, like, because you'll want to play it earlier, it does potentially battle for priority, but you can play it on the final turn alongside a Shang-Chi or a Rogue because it's so cheap, and it's still a reasonable amount of power. So I do think that it is really solid. This would be my recommendation for the season if you had to spend Spotlight keys on it. So the fact that they are giving this card away for free is awesome. I will have more information about Deadpool's Diner, as will everyone else, as it comes closer. Not going to stress out about it just yet because it's only like the second half of the season, but it does mean that I think it's worth trying to grind for Infinite a little bit sooner this season so that way you can use your spare time and potentially some of those conquest tickets. That way you can use some of your free time, if that is a limited resource to you, to battle in Deadpool's Diner for Cassandra Nova. But I do think that this card is very good. This is my pick of the season for the #1 card coming out, just because of RSM. And I'm going to be, for those that don't know, also, I'm going to be playing RSM all season long, only RSM. And I have not played anything except for RSM since it released, not just because it's powerful, but also because it's fun. And I will have videos coming out. I might do like a video every day of just like how far I got along in my grind up to Infinite. Once Deadpool's Diner comes out, if I decide that like I really want to go for the top level of rewards in that, I believe there's additional rewards for the top 100 players. If I decide to battle for that, then I might shelve RSM for a second, just because Cassandra's going to make RSM a little bit worse even. And one other thing that is kind of interesting is there will be a window, because Deadpool's Diner will release and everybody won't get the new card immediately, which is what happens with any other release in Marvel Snap. But instead, players will have to grind a little bit, and then we'll start to see more and more Cassandras throughout the week. So I think that that also makes it really interesting, and also provides an additional incentive to like get in there quick and early and be the first player to get Cassandra, throw it in your RSM lists, and then beat up on all of the other players with RSM, but without Cassandra yet. So that is a pretty interesting aspect of this specific metagame. But yes, Cassandra Nova, my pick of the month. And on the flip side of things, like my dud of the month, I think that this is actually the worst card, and I'm not super hot on some of the other cards that I've talked about, but Ajax I think is the worst card coming out this season by far. A 5/5 without any support is just terrible, so you definitely need to play into it. I would rather see this card at +2 power and maybe like a little bit less stats on it, but ultimately it's just not that exciting to me. Even if you're able to shrink all of your opponent's cards, like with a final turn hazmat or something. Oh, it is each card in play. Oh, that is interesting. Okay. So hazmat shrinking your own cards is going to mean that you pump up Ajax. I just think it's too little for too much energy. That's my honest thought on it. They've got some cute high roll moments here in the video, playing it into Onslaught Citadel, sure, but it's a 5/11 in Onslaught Citadel. Like, very not good. Red Guardian is a great card. Cyclops is a great card. It's going to shrink these more at the end of turn, pump up the Ajax even further. And then we also see Scorpion. Yeah, here it's big, but like a 5/12, 5/13 that we've sunk all of this other synergy into, I don't know, just doesn't really excite me. I also wanted to talk for a second about Gilgamesh, last season's Season Pass card, because if you are a free-to-play player, now is the first time that you can pick up Gilgamesh for in-game resources without having to spend real money, and I wanted to talk about if you should be doing that. Should you drop 6,000 tokens to get Gilgamesh right now? No, I think that's pretty obvious. Gilgamesh is not really that good. They buffed it mid-season even, and it's still not really a card that is seeing that much play. It's definitely good now, and it's kind of pushed as a 5/9 that then just gets bigger than that. But of course, it's not disruptive, and it's Shang-Chiable, and it's Shadow Kingable, kind of. It's Cannonballable. So Gilgamesh has not been that strong, but I did kind of just want to talk about it for a second in this video to say that I think that Gwenpool will be a similar power level. I think that Gwenpool will be more fun and be a little bit more interesting potentially, have some cooler combos and things. So I would say there's like 3 levels of Season Pass cards, just in terms of what you should spend to acquire them. The first, the top tier, those are the cards that I am super happy to spend 6,000 tokens on as soon as I can. As soon as their season ends, I buy them with tokens. and you only get so many tokens. I think that as a free-to-play player, this is the best possible use of tokens, and I'm talking about Silver Surfer, Zabu, Loki, and then to a lesser extent also Hope Summers and Scar. I also spent 6,000 tokens on both of those cards. They were really good when I did that back at the beginning of this year. They were seeing a lot of play in Thanos lists. Maybe not as common now because Thanos isn't that great, but still I think they justified spending 6,000 tokens on. The next tier is not quite that good, but when they become available in Spotlight caches, you'll definitely prioritize them and open them up alongside a new card. So that'll be like Elsa, probably Phoenix Force for most people. So the reason I bring this up is Black Swan was just in Spotlight caches alongside Arishem. And I did not have Black Swan, but I also did not decide to open up another Spotlight cache specifically for Black Swan. And I had actually opened up, I got Hercules and then I got Arishem, so I was down to Black Swan and a mystery card, and I decided to just save my tokens. And I think that that's the level that Gilgamesh is at. I'll be more willing to open on a week where Gilgamesh is in there, but I might stop before I continue to open up for Gilgamesh. And I think Gwenpool is just like a little bit better than that, a little bit more interesting, but still definitely down on that third tier. I wanted to take a look at the other cards returning to Spotlight caches as well this week. So first off, we've got Hydra Bob alongside Galactus and Nebula. Nebula is solid. It's probably the best card of these three, but Galactus is definitely a skip right now. I just don't think Galactus is really good or anything that you want to be looking at. It's just too hard to activate, and when you activate it, you still have to build around it outside of that. So I don't think that this is something that is really worth spending keys on. If you get Hydra Bob and Nebula, it's fine, but it's not like these cards go in the same deck either, so that doesn't necessarily make it a hit. Similar thing with Ajax. Like, if Ajax was alongside High Evo or something here, that could be really cool because that's a combo with Ajax. I do think that Darkhawk is a really important card, but it's Series 4, so you can probably pick it up as your free card from Series 4 each month if you haven't done so already. I believe that's a mechanic in the game, right? Or do you get a free card from Series 3? Maybe you get a free card from Series 3. I might be misremembering that a little bit. If you don't have Darkhawk and you're really feeling that right now because a bunch of people are playing Arishem and you want it, I could see going for that, but Beta Ray Bill is a definite skip, and Ajax is definitely the worst card this season, so I would probably say to save your keys and just pick up Darkhawk for some tokens. July 23rd, we get Copycat alongside Cole Obsidian and Thanos. Now, Copycat is not necessarily a combo with Cole Obsidian or Thanos, other than just Copycat being a good card, and Thanos appreciates playing some good cards. Cole Obsidian and Thanos are a nice little combo with each other though, so I could see going for this. Thanos is definitely, yeah, I think I could say this. It's probably among the worst it's ever been right now, so it's not like I'm super jumping to get Thanos if you don't already have it, but I think that Copycat is worth pulling for. And I do think that Cole Obsidian and Thanos are cards that you will appreciate having if you don't already. So I think that, again, that's another incentive to open up this week. Now, this week has no new card. However, if you are a free-to-play player, this might be the first time that you are seeing Hope Summers. I believe this is the first time Hope Summers is available in Spotlight caches. So that is a great reason to open up on the 30th to round out the month. Nico is a great card if you don't have it. I think that Nico is the best card of this week, and it's one of those cards that just sees play in so many different types of decks that it's probably worth picking up. It's really bad in Arishem decks, so if you are in Arishem one trick like myself, you can skip this one. Hope Summers is still reasonable, but you can definitely skip this week. Proxima Midnight is a very specific card that you definitely don't need, but Nico and Hope Summers both see play in a variety of different decks. So I could see opening up for them if you don't have them, and you probably don't have Proxima Midnight either. So this is honestly, just because it has like 2 good cards in it, this might be the best week to open up on the 30th with no brand new cards, other than Copycat Week, which, I mean, like, Thanos is not great right now, but it's still fine, and it's probably still about as good as Hope Summer. So those are my recommendations for this season. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you think about all of the cards coming to Marvel Snap and these new returning cards and anything else. Leave a comment and hit subscribe if you are not already. This is the final video that you can enter in for a giveaway for credits, premium mystery variants, and gold. So make sure you do that if you are not already entered. Well, you can enter again. More comments is more entries. So leave a comment on this video. But for today, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.